Some people spend their whole lives searching for purpose. Mine walked through the kitchen door on a rainy Tuesday night, 5 years old and starving, with eyes that had already seen too much darkness. The fluorescent lights of Brooklyn Ridge Diner flickered and buzzed like dying insects, casting shadows that made the cracked linoleum floor look older than it already was. I'd been working double shifts for 3 months straight, my feet aching in shoes held together with duct tape and prayers, trying to scrape together enough money to keep the electricity on in my studio apartment. At 24, I felt 70. Every table I served was another reminder of the life I'd imagined versus the reality I'd inherited. My mother's medical bills had consumed everything: the college fund, the dreams of becoming a teacher, the naive belief that hard work and good intentions could overcome bad luck. She'd been gone for 6 months, and I was still drowning in debt that compounded faster than I could earn. The diner was nearly empty that night, just a couple of truckers nursing coffee in the corner booth, and a businessman typing furiously on his laptop, ignoring the burger growing cold in front of him. Rain hammered against the windows with the kind of violence that suggested the sky itself was angry, and I found myself watching the drops race down the glass, making bets with myself about which one would reach the bottom first. Anything to distract from the monotony of wiping down tables that would just get dirty again, refilling coffee cups for people who barely acknowledged my existence, smiling until my face hurt at customers who treated me like I was part of the furniture. That's when I heard it. A small sound, barely audible over the storm and the kitchen noise. A whimper, like a wounded animal trying not to draw attention to itself. I paused, my cleaning rag suspended over a table still sticky with syrup from the breakfast rush, and listened. There it was again, coming from somewhere near the kitchen's back entrance. My manager, a perpetually sweating man who smelled like old grease and cheaper whiskey, had gone out for his smoke break. The cook was in the walk-in freezer doing inventory. For a moment, I was alone with that sound, and the choice of whether to investigate or ignore it. I should have ignored it. Should have minded my business and finished my shift and gone home to my cold apartment where at least the problems were familiar. Instead, I followed the sound around the corner, past the industrial dishwasher that had been broken for 2 weeks, toward the back door that led to the alley where we kept the dumpsters. She was crouched between the dumpster and the wall, a tiny figure in a dress that had probably been expensive once, but was now torn and filthy. Her dark hair hung in tangled curtains around her face, and when she looked up at me, I saw eyes that were too old for her small frame, filled with the kind of fear that came from knowing exactly how cruel the world could be. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, her skinny arms wrapped around her knees, shivering in the cold rain that had soaked through her clothes. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Me, in my stained uniform with my name tag hanging crooked, her looking like some fairy tale princess who'd wandered into the wrong story and gotten lost. Then her stomach growled loud enough for me to hear over the rain, and something in my chest cracked open. I knew that hunger, had felt it myself during the months after my mother died, when choosing between food and keeping the lights on was a daily calculation. Nobody should know that feeling, especially not a child who looked like she should be tucked into bed with a stuffed animal and a nightlight, not hiding behind a dumpster in the rain. I crouched down slowly, making myself small and non-threatening. The movement sent pain shooting through my knees, a reminder that standing on concrete floors for 12 hours had consequences my body was starting to register. When I spoke, I kept my voice soft, the way I'd learned to talk to the stray cats that hung around the dumpsters looking for scraps. "Hey there, are you hungry?" She didn't answer, but her eyes, dark and bottomless, flickered toward the diner's back door. That was answer enough. "I'm going to get you something to eat, okay? Just wait right here. Don't run away." Still no response, but she didn't bolt when I stood up, which I took as permission. I slipped back through the kitchen door, my mind already calculating what I could take without my manager noticing. The diner's policy was strict about giving away food. Everything had to be paid for or thrown away at the end of the night. Taking food, even food destined for the trash, was grounds for immediate termination. But looking at that little girl's hollow cheeks and terrified eyes, I couldn't bring myself to care about policy. I grabbed a clean plate and filled it with things a child might like. Chicken fingers from the warmer, French fries that were still hot, a bread roll with butter, and a chocolate chip cookie from the jar by the register. I poured a large glass of milk and tucked a few extra napkins under my arm. The whole operation took maybe 3 minutes, but my heart hammered like I was committing a major crime. When I returned to the alley, she was still there, still pressed against the wall like she was trying to make herself invisible. I set the plate and milk on a relatively clean section of concrete and backed away, giving her space. She stared at the food like it might be a trap, like kindness itself was something dangerous and unfamiliar. Then hunger won over caution, and she fell on the meal with desperate intensity, shoving food into her mouth so fast I worried she might choke. "Slow down," I said gently. "Nobody's going to take it from you. I promise." But she didn't slow down, and I understood. When you've been hungry long enough, your body stops trusting that food will keep coming. You eat like every meal might be your last because in your experience, it very well might be. I watched her eat in the rain, my own stomach growling in sympathy. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's shift meal, another consequence of choosing between food and bills. But seeing her devour that plate with single-minded focus made my own hunger feel trivial, almost selfish. When she finally slowed down, when the frantic edge left her movements, I tried again. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Silence. Her small hands clutched the empty glass, and I noticed they were scratched and bruised, the nails broken like she'd been clawing at something. "Where are your parents?" More silence, but this time her eyes filled with tears that she blinked back with fierce determination. That look told me more than words could have. This wasn't a child who'd wandered away from her family during a shopping trip. This was a child who'd been running from something, or toward something, or both. "Okay," I said, making a decision that would change everything. "You don't have to tell me anything, but it's cold and wet out here, and you need somewhere safe to stay. My apartment isn't much, but it's warm and dry. Would you like to come with me?" I knew it was crazy. I was a stranger to her, and she was a stranger to me. I should call the police, let the professionals handle this, follow the proper procedures that existed for situations exactly like this one. But something in her eyes stopped me. A terror so profound that I knew involving authorities would send her running back into the night, back into whatever danger she'd escaped from. She studied me for a long moment, those two old eyes weighing and measuring, trying to determine if I was another threat in a world full of them. Then, slowly, she nodded. The smallest movement, barely perceptible, but it was agreement. I held out my hand, half expecting her to bolt. Instead, after a hesitation that felt like an eternity compressed into seconds, she placed her small, cold hand in mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong, like she was holding onto a lifeline in a storm. We went back through the kitchen, me praying that my manager was still outside smoking and that the cook was still buried in the freezer doing his endless inventory. Luck was with us, or fate was, or whatever force controls the small moments that change everything. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the time clock and wrapped it around her tiny shoulders. It swallowed her completely, hanging past her knees like an oversized coat in a children's book. "You need to stay quiet, okay?" I whispered. "Just for a few more minutes, and then we can leave." She nodded again, and I felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it surprised me. This child I'd known for less than 15 minutes had somehow become my responsibility, my purpose. the thing I needed to protect above all else. We slipped out through the front door while my manager was still in the alley. I'd finish my shift tomorrow, deal with the consequences tomorrow, explain my disappearance tomorrow. Tonight, getting this little girl somewhere safe was the only thing that mattered. The walk to my apartment was 6 blocks, each one feeling like a mile in the rain. She walked beside me without complaint, her hand never leaving mine, her steps determined despite obvious exhaustion. Cars passed, their headlights turning the wet streets into rivers of light, and each time one slowed down, I felt her grip tighten with fear. Nobody stopped us. To the world, we probably looked normal enough, just a young woman and a child walking home in the rain. Nobody looked close enough to see the terror in her eyes or the desperation in my determination to keep her safe. My studio apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. The stairs creaked under our weight, and the hallway smelled like old cooking and mildew. But when I unlocked my door and flicked on the light, I felt grateful for what little I had. It wasn't much. A futon that served as both couch and bed, a tiny kitchenette with a hot plate and a mini fridge, a bathroom so small you had to stand sideways to close the door. But it was warm and dry and mine, and right now, that was enough. The little girl stood in the center of my apartment, dripping on the threadbare carpet, looking around with those unreadable dark eyes. I grabbed the only towel I owned that wasn't covered in bleach stains and began gently drying her hair. She stood perfectly still during this, like she was used to people touching her, but not used to it being gentle. Up close, I could see more details that troubled me. The bruises on her arms weren't fresh, but they were there, in various stages of healing. Her dress, beneath the dirt, was made of expensive fabric with delicate embroidery that spoke of wealth and care that didn't match her current state. And around her neck, barely visible beneath her tangled hair, was a delicate gold chain with a pendant I couldn't quite make out. "Let's get you into something dry." I rummaged through my dresser, pulling out the smallest t-shirt I owned. It still hung on her like a tent, but it was clean and dry, and that was what mattered. I turned my back while she changed, giving her what privacy I could in my tiny space. When I turned around, she was sitting on my futon, her legs dangling, her small frame nearly swallowed by my oversized shirt. She looked impossibly young and impossibly fragile, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle over me like a physical thing. I sat down beside her, careful to maintain distance, not wanting to crowd her. "My name is Eveline," I said, figuring I should start with basics. "Can you tell me your name?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing whether to trust me with even this small piece of information. Then, in a voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear it, she whispered, "Lily, Lily." I tested the name, and it felt right, delicate and strong at once, like the flower itself. "That's a beautiful name. Lily, can you tell me what happened to you? How did you end up behind the diner?" Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't blink them back. They spilled down her cheeks in silent streams, and before I knew what I was doing, I'd pulled her into my arms. She was stiff at first, resistant. But then something broke inside her and she collapsed against me, sobbing with the kind of heartbreak that shakes your whole body. I held her while she cried, this stranger child who felt like she'd always been mine to protect. When the sobs finally subsided into hiccups, she pulled back and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Bad men came," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "They hurt the people at the house. They were looking for me." My blood ran cold. What people? What house? But she just shook her head, fresh tears threatening. "I can't go back. They'll find me. They'll hurt me too." "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm even as my mind raced with implications. "You don't have to go back anywhere you don't want to go. You're safe here, Lily. I promise." It was a promise I had no business making, a commitment that could destroy what little stability I'd managed to build. But looking at her terrified face, I knew I'd keep that promise or die trying. We spent that first night in a strange sort of vigil. Lily fell asleep curled against me, her small body finally relaxing as exhaustion overtook fear. I stayed awake, watching the shadows on the ceiling and wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Taking in a child wasn't like feeding a stray cat. There would be questions, authorities, systems designed to handle situations exactly like this. But something told me that involving those systems would be the worst thing I could do for Lily. Whatever she was running from, whoever those bad men were, they were the kind of threat that made a 5-year-old girl hide behind dumpsters in the rain rather than seek help from adults. Morning came too soon and too bright, sunlight streaming through my single window and highlighting every crack and stain in my apartment. Lily stirred beside me, and for a moment her face was peaceful, almost happy. Then awareness returned, and with it, the fear. "It's okay," I said quickly before she could panic. "You're still safe. You're still here with me." She nodded, but her body remained tense, coiled like a spring ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. I needed to call in sick to work, needed to figure out what to do next, needed to make decisions about a situation I had no training or preparation for. But first, I needed to feed this little girl breakfast and show her that not all adults were threats. I made scrambled eggs on my hot plate, using the last of my groceries and not caring. Lily watched me from the futon, her dark eyes tracking my every movement with an alertness that seemed exhausting to maintain. When I handed her the plate, she ate more slowly this time, with better manners, and I caught glimpses of the child she must have been before whatever had happened to shatter her sense of safety. "Thank you," she whispered, the first unprompted words she'd spoken. "You're welcome, sweetheart." I sat across from her on the floor, my own stomach empty but my heart surprisingly full. "Lily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is there anyone safe I can call for you? Family? Friends? Anyone who's worried about where you are?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she reached into the pocket of her dirty dress, which I'd folded carefully on the floor, and pulled out something small and square. A photograph, worn and creased like it had been looked at many times. She handed it to me without speaking. The photograph showed a man, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair and eyes that matched Lily's. He was dressed in an expensive suit standing in front of what looked like a mansion, and he was smiling at someone behind the camera with an expression of pure love. But it was the intensity in his eyes that made me shiver, a kind of focused power that suggested this was not a man you crossed lightly. "Is this your father?" I asked gently. Lily nodded, her small face crumpling with fresh grief. "He was at the house when the bad men came. I tried to find him, but everyone was yelling and there was so much noise. So I ran, like he always told me to do if something bad happened. I ran and hid, and I kept running until I couldn't run anymore." My hand trembled slightly as I studied the photograph. This man looked nothing like the deadbeat fathers I'd known in my neighborhood, the ones who showed up drunk to their kids' birthdays or forgot them entirely. This man looked like someone important, someone powerful, someone who would move heaven and earth to find his missing daughter. Which meant he was either searching for her right now, or he was dead, and Lily was truly alone in the world. "Do you know your father's name? His full name?" She nodded. "His name is Robert. Robert Evernever." And just like that, my world shifted on its axis. Robert Evernever. Even I, who paid little attention to the news because I was too busy surviving to care about the dramas of people richer and more powerful than me, knew that name. Robert Evernever was a legend in this city, spoken about in whispers and carefully neutral tones. Businessman, philanthropist, art collector, real estate mogul. and, if the rumors were even half true, the most dangerous man in the state. Robert Evernever controlled everything that mattered in Brooklyn Ridge, from the politicians who made the laws to the police who enforced them. His legitimate businesses were vast and successful, but everyone knew those were just the visible parts of an empire built on things that happened in shadows: protection rackets, illegal gambling, money laundering, and worse. Much worse. He was untouchable because he'd made himself indispensable to too many powerful people, because he had enough money to make problems disappear, and enough ruthlessness to ensure those problems stayed gone. And I was sitting in my shabby apartment with his daughter, who'd apparently witnessed some kind of attack on his home, and was now in hiding because she was terrified of bad men who wanted to hurt her. The intelligent thing to do would be to call someone immediately. The police? A hospital? Even the number for Child Protective Services that was posted on a flyer at the diner. Let professionals who knew how to handle situations involving powerful crime lords and traumatized children take over. But as I looked at Lily, who was watching me with those two knowing eyes, waiting to see if I would betray her trust, I found I couldn't do it. Something in her expression reminded me of myself at that age, after my father left and my mother started working 3 jobs to keep us fed. That look that said the world was fundamentally unsafe and trusting adults was a risk that rarely paid off. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay here with me, where it's safe. And I'm going to figure out how to find your father and make sure he knows you're okay. But Lily, you have to tell me everything you remember about what happened. Can you do that?" She considered this, her small face serious with the weight of the decision. Then, slowly, she began to speak. Her voice was quiet, halting, breaking occasionally when memories became too sharp. But the story that emerged was terrifying in its clarity. 3 nights ago, men had come to the Evernever estate. Not during the day, when there were guards and security and people everywhere. They'd come in the dark, somehow getting past all the protection that should have kept them out. Lily had been in her room when she heard the first gunshots. Her father had taught her what to do if this ever happened. Had drilled her on the protocols with the kind of seriousness that suggested he'd always known this day might come. She was supposed to go to the panic room in her father's study, lock herself inside, and wait for him or one of his trusted people to come get her. But when she'd tried to follow the plan, running through the hallways of the massive house, she'd seen things a 5-year-old should never witness. People she knew, people who'd worked for her father, lying still in growing pools of darkness. The sounds of fighting, breaking glass, her father's voice shouting orders in the distance. And then hands grabbing at her, a rough voice saying they'd found the girl, bring her to the boss. She'd bitten the hand that grabbed her, hard enough to taste blood, and when the grip loosened in surprise, she'd run. Down servants' stairs she'd explored during games of hide-and-seek, through the kitchen where the cook used to sneak her cookies, out through a delivery entrance that was standing open. She'd run into the night wearing only her dress and shoes, no coat, no plan, just the animal instinct to get away from danger. For 3 days, she'd been hiding, sleeping in parks, behind buildings, anywhere she could find shelter, drinking from public fountains, too terrified to approach adults who might be working for the men who'd attacked her home. Until hunger and exhaustion had driven her to the alley behind my diner, where she'd been hoping to find something edible in the dumpsters. I listened to this story with growing horror, my mind struggling to process what it meant. If Lily had witnessed an attack on Robert Evernever's home 3 nights ago, then why hadn't it been all over the news? An assault on someone that powerful should have been front-page material, police swarming, investigations launched. Unless Robert Evernever had kept it quiet deliberately. Unless revealing what happened would show weakness he couldn't afford to display. Or unless something had happened to him during the attack, and the people who now controlled his organization were keeping his death secret while they consolidated power. "Lily," I said carefully, "when you ran, did you see your father? Was he hurt?" "I saw him fighting," she whispered, her small hands twisting in the oversized t-shirt. "He was yelling for the guards, telling them to protect me. But there were so many bad men, and they had guns, and I couldn't stay. I couldn't, because he'd made me promise that if something bad happened, I would run and hide and stay alive, no matter what." Her voice broke on the last words, and I pulled her close again. This tiny girl who'd been carrying the weight of survival and grief for 3 days alone. "You did the right thing," I told her, meaning it. "Your father would be proud of you for being so brave. But now we need to figure out if he's looking for you, and how to get you back to him safely." The problem was, I had no idea how to do that. I couldn't just walk up to Robert Evernever's estate and ring the doorbell. If he was alive, he was probably in hiding or planning retaliation. If he was dead, whoever had taken over would be looking for Lily as leverage or as a loose end to tie up. Either way, approaching the situation directly seemed like a good way to get us both killed. I spent the morning while Lily dozed on my futon, exhaustion finally catching up with her, trying to figure out what to do. I called in sick to work, which would probably cost me my job given my manager's zero-tolerance policy for absences. But losing my job seemed like a minor problem compared to keeping a traumatized 5-year-old safe from people who conducted home invasions against crime lords. I needed information, needed to understand what had actually happened at the Evernever estate, and whether Robert Evernever was alive or dead. But I couldn't exactly Google Robert Evernever home invasion and expect reliable results. Men like him kept their private disasters private, using influence and money to control narratives. Then I remembered something. The businessman who'd been at the diner that night typing on his laptop while his burger went cold. He'd been wearing an expensive watch and a suit that cost more than I made in 6 months. And he'd left a business card with his credit card receipt. I'd noticed it when I was cleaning up, had almost thrown it away, then tucked it into my apron pocket for no reason I could name. Found it. The card was crumpled but readable, embossed letters announcing he was a senior vice president at Meridian Financial Group, one of the largest investment firms in the state. I stared at that card for a long time, weighing risks against potential rewards. Meridian Financial was the kind of company that did business with people like Robert Evernever. They'd know things, have access to information that didn't make it into public channels. But approaching them meant exposing myself, creating a trail that could lead the wrong people right to Lily. Still, I couldn't think of a better option. If I did nothing, Lily would remain in hiding indefinitely, and eventually, someone would find us. If I tried to contact Robert Evernever directly, I might be walking into a trap. But if I could get information from someone in the financial sector, someone who dealt with Evernever's legitimate business interests, I might learn enough to make an informed decision about what to do next. I waited until Lily woke up, fed her the last of my food, a can of soup heated on the hot plate, and explained what I was planning. "I need to go out for a little while," I told her. "Just a few hours. You'll be safe here if you lock the door and don't answer for anyone." Her eyes went wide with fear. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me alone." The desperation in her voice nearly broke my resolve, but I couldn't take her with me, couldn't risk exposing her to potential danger, and I couldn't make progress on finding her father while keeping her by my side every second. "Listen to me." I knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in mine. "I am coming back. I promise you, Lily, I will not abandon you. But I need to find out if your father is safe, and to do that, I need to talk to someone who might have information. It's going to be boring. Just a meeting in an office building. Nothing dangerous. But you'll be safer here, where nobody knows to look for you. Can you be brave for a few hours?" She studied my face with that unnerving intensity, trying to determine if I was lying, If I was just another adult who would promise safety and then disappear. Then, slowly, she nodded. I'll be brave, but you have to come back. You have to. I will. I gave her the key to my apartment, showed her how to lock the door from the inside and use the chain. I left her with a coloring book I'd bought months ago for a neighbor's child and never delivered, and the tiny television that only got 3 channels. Then I left, my heart heavy with the weight of her trust and the fear that I was making a terrible mistake. The offices of Meridian Financial occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest building in Brooklyn Ridge's business district. Glass and steel reaching toward the sky, the kind of place where decisions that affected thousands of lives were made over catered lunches and conference calls. I'd never been inside a building like this, and walking through the marble lobby in my discount store clothes and worn shoes made me feel like an intruder from another world. The security guard at the desk looked at me with barely disguised suspicion. Can I help you? I have a meeting with someone, I lied, glancing at the business card. I'm here to see someone in the senior management offices. Who's your appointment with? I took a breath and gave the name from the card, watching his expression shift from suspicion to confusion. When had this nobody scheduled an appointment with one of the company's executives? He made a phone call, spoke in low tones, and hung up looking puzzled. Someone will be down to escort you shortly. Please wait in the seating area. 20 minutes later, a woman in a sharp suit appeared, her expression professional but curious. I'm told you're here to see someone from our executive team. Do you have an appointment? No, I admitted. But I have information about a client of yours that's time-sensitive and extremely important. Information about Robert Evernever. Her carefully neutral expression flickered just for a second before settling back into professional courtesy. That's a name that carries weight, that flicker told me. I'm afraid I can't discuss our clients without proper authorization, but if you'd like to leave your contact information, I can pass it along to the appropriate parties. I need to speak with someone now. It's about his daughter. Another flicker, stronger this time. Concern? Alarm? Before she could respond, a man appeared behind her. The same businessman from the diner, looking more alert now, his eyes sharp with recognition. You're the waitress. From Brooklyn Ridge Diner. I nodded, relief flooding through me at not having to explain who I was. I need to talk to you. It's about something that happened 3 nights ago. Something involving a very important little girl who's currently terrified and in hiding. His expression transformed, professionalism giving way to intense focus. Come with me. Now. He led me past the security desk, into an elevator that required a special keycard to access the upper floors, and finally into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city spread out below like a map of territories and power. The moment the door closed behind us, his demeanor shifted from curious to deadly serious. Who are you? And what do you know about Lily Evernever? The use of her full name confirmed what I'd suspected. This man wasn't just any businessman. He was connected to Robert Evernever in ways that went beyond normal client relationships. My name is Eveline. I work at Brooklyn Ridge Diner. 3 nights ago, a little girl appeared in the alley behind the restaurant. She was alone, terrified, starving. I fed her and took her to my apartment because she was too scared to let me call anyone for help. His expression was unreadable, but his body language suggested coiled tension, like a predator deciding whether to pounce. Why are you here now? Why not 3 days ago? Because she just told me who she is, who her father is. And I need to know if Robert Evernever is alive and searching for his daughter, or if I'm harboring the child of a dead man while his killers hunt for her. The words hung in the air between us. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the distinct feeling I was being evaluated for trustworthiness, for intelligence, for whether I was a genuine Good Samaritan or part of some elaborate scheme. Robert Ever Never is alive, he said finally, injured, but alive. And yes, he's searching for his daughter. Every resource at his disposal has been dedicated to finding her for the past 3 days. Relief washed over me so intensely I felt my knees weaken. He's alive. Then why hasn't it been on the news? Why aren't there police everywhere looking for a missing 5-year-old? Because Robert Evernever doesn't advertise his vulnerabilities. The man moved to the window, looking out over the city. The attack on his estate was an attempted coup by a rival organization. They failed, barely, but they got closer than anyone has in 15 years. Admitting that publicly would invite every enemy he has to take their shot while he's wounded. So he's kept it quiet, handling it internally. And his daughter? If word gets out that she's missing, that she's vulnerable, she becomes the most valuable target in the state. Every rival, every ambitious lieutenant, every enemy Robert Evernever has made over the years would hunt her as leverage, so he's searching quietly, using his network, trying to find her before anyone realizes she's gone. The man turned back to me, his expression intense. You said she's safe. Where is she? I hesitated. This was the moment of trust, the decision that would determine whether I'd saved Lily or delivered her into danger. She's somewhere safe. But before I tell you anything more, I need proof that you're who you say you are. That you work for Robert Evernever and not the people who attacked his home. Fair enough. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and spoke quietly in a tone that suggested he was talking to someone important. Then he handed the phone to me. A voice came through, rough with exhaustion and pain, but carrying undeniable authority. Who am I speaking with? My name is Eveline. I'm a waitress at Brooklyn Ridge Diner, and I have information about your daughter. Where is she? The desperation in that question, the raw need beneath the controlled tone, told me more than any proof of identity could have. This was a father who'd been living in hell for 3 days, not knowing if his child was dead or alive. She's safe with me. She's been scared and hungry, but she's unharmed. I need to know that bringing her to you won't put her in more danger. You have my word, and in my world, that means everything. Robert Evernever's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Where can I meet you? Not at your estate, I said, making a decision that probably made me foolish but felt necessary. Somewhere public, where I can see you're alone and unarmed. Somewhere Lily can see you're safe before I hand her over. There was a pause, and I wondered if I'd pushed too far, if demanding conditions from a man like Robert Evernever was the kind of mistake people didn't survive. But when he spoke again, there was something like respect in his tone. The north entrance of Barrowfield Park, in 2 hours. Come alone. I'll be there. The line went dead, and I handed the phone back to the businessman, whose name I still didn't know. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. You just gave orders to Robert Evernever. Most people don't survive that level of audacity. Most people don't have his daughter depending on them for safety. I met his gaze steadily. Will he honor the agreement? He will. Robert Evernever's word is the only currency that matters in his world. Break it, and he loses everything that keeps his empire functioning. The man extended his hand. My name is David. I handle Robert's legitimate financial interests. If you need anything, any support getting Lily safely to her father, you call me. I took his card, a second business card in 2 weeks, that connected me to a world I'd never imagined touching. Then I left, retracing my steps through the marble lobby and out into the afternoon sunlight. My mind already racing ahead to the next challenge of convincing a traumatized 5-year-old that it was safe to trust her father was really alive and really coming for her. When I returned to my apartment, Lily was exactly where I'd left her, curled up on the futon with the coloring book open but untouched. She looked up when I entered, her face transforming with relief so profound it made my chest ache. You came back. I promised I would. I sat beside her, taking her small hands in mine. Lily, I have good news. I found your father. He's alive, and he's been searching for you. Her eyes went wide, filling with tears. Really? He's really okay? He's really okay. And he wants to see you. We're going to meet him in a little while, somewhere safe, and then you can go home. But instead of the joy I'd expected, her expression crumpled into confusion and fear. What if it's a trick? What if the bad men are pretending to be him? It's not a trick, sweetheart. I spoke to him myself. But I understand why you're scared, so we're going to be very careful. We're meeting him in a public place, and if anything feels wrong, if you're scared at all, we'll leave immediately. Okay? She considered this, her small face serious with the weight of hope and fear balanced on a knife's edge. Finally, she nodded. Okay. But you have to stay with me. You have to be there too. I wouldn't have it any other way. We prepared for the meeting like soldiers preparing for battle, which in a way, I suppose we were. I dressed in my best clothes, which weren't much, but were clean, and made me feel slightly less like I was wandering into a situation completely out of my depth. Lily wore her original dress, cleaned as best I could manage, her hair brushed and braided. She looked like a little girl again instead of a terrified survivor, and I hoped that transformation would hold. The bus ride to Barrowfield Park felt like it took forever and no time at all. Lily sat pressed against me, her small hand gripping mine with desperate strength, her eyes tracking every person who got on or off the bus like they might be threats. I kept up a steady stream of quiet conversation, telling her about the park, about the ducks in the pond, about anything that might distract her from the fear I could feel radiating from her small body. Barrowfield Park was beautiful in the late afternoon light, the kind of place where families came to play and couples walked hand in hand and the world felt safe and normal. We approached the north entrance slowly, my eyes scanning for Robert Evernever, for threats, for any sign that this was the trap Lily feared. And then I saw him. He was standing near a bench, dressed in dark clothes that probably cost more than my car, if I'd owned a car. Even from a distance I could see the resemblance to the photograph Lily carried, the same dark hair, the same intense eyes, the same powerful presence that suggested this was a man used to commanding rooms and respect. But he also looked haunted, exhausted, like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. There were shadows under his eyes, and a careful stiffness to his posture that suggested injuries barely healed. When his gaze found us, when he saw Lily standing beside me, his entire expression transformed. The powerful crime lord disappeared, replaced by a father who'd thought he might never see his daughter again. Lily. He didn't shout, didn't run toward us, just spoke her name with a kind of desperate reverence that made tears spring to my eyes. Lily froze beside me, her hand tightening on mine. Daddy? The word was barely a whisper, hope and fear and love all tangled together in 2 syllables. It's me, baby girl. It's really me. I'm here, and I'm going to keep you safe, I promise. Something broke inside Lily. She released my hand and ran, her small legs carrying her across the grass toward the father she'd thought she might have lost forever. Robert Evernever dropped to his knees as she reached him, catching her in his arms and holding her with the kind of fierce protectiveness that suggested he'd fight heaven and hell to never let her go again. I watched them from a distance, this reunion I'd made possible, feeling strangely empty now that my purpose was fulfilled. This was where my part of the story ended. I'd fed a hungry child, given her shelter, and returned her to her family. Now I could go back to my ordinary life of double shifts and unpaid bills, and the grinding poverty that had defined my existence. But before I could turn to leave, Robert Evernever looked up, his eyes finding mine across the grass. With Lily still clutched in his arms, he stood and walked toward me, with that same careful stiffness that spoke of pain he was ignoring. When he reached me, he studied my face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "You're Eveline." "Yes. I'm glad to meet you properly. And thank you." The words were simple, inadequate for what had passed between us, but they carried weight. I did what anyone would have done. "No." Robert Evernever's voice was certain. "Most people would have called the authorities or looked the other way. You risked yourself to protect my daughter when you had no reason to trust me or my world. That's not something I'll forget." Lily pulled back from her father's chest, looking between us with those two knowing eyes. "Daddy, Eveline saved me. She gave me food and let me stay in her house, and she was nice when everyone else was scary." "I know, baby girl." Robert's hand stroked his daughter's hair with infinite gentleness. "And we're going to make sure Eveline knows how grateful we are." "I don't want gratitude," I said, meaning it. "I just wanted to make sure Lily got home safely. Now she has, so I should go." Robert Evernever studied me for another long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing more than I wanted to reveal. My apartment that barely qualified as shelter, the worn clothes that were my best outfit, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been struggling for so long they'd forgotten what security felt like. "You work at Brooklyn Ridge Diner?" "Yes." "How much do they pay you there?" The question caught me off guard. Not enough to live on comfortably, but enough to survive. "What does that have to do with anything?" "I'm offering you a job. Working for me, in a capacity that would utilize your obvious intelligence, compassion, and ability to think clearly under pressure. The salary would be 10 times what you're making now, with benefits that include healthcare, housing, and the knowledge that you'd be part of something that matters." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "You want to hire me?" "To do what exactly?" "My organization requires people I can trust absolutely. People who prove their character through actions rather than words." Robert's expression was serious. "You protected my daughter when doing so offered you nothing but risk and inconvenience. That kind of integrity is rare, and I value it highly." This was crazy. Working for Robert Evernever meant entering a world of violence and moral ambiguity, of luxury built on foundations I'd been raised to condemn. Everything I knew about right and wrong, about staying away, from people who operated outside the law, screamed at me to refuse. But I thought about my apartment with its leaking windows and broken furniture, about the medical bills that would follow me for years, probably decades, no matter how many double shifts I worked, about the exhaustion that had become my constant companion, the feeling that I was running in place while the world moved forward without me. And I thought about Lily, this little girl who'd walked into my life by accident and changed everything. If I said yes, I could actually help people like her, actually make a difference beyond just surviving day to day. "I need time to think about it," I said finally. "That's fair." Robert reached into his pocket and withdrew a card, simpler than the ones David had given me but somehow carrying more weight. "This has my private number. When you're ready to decide, call me. We'll talk about what the position would entail, what would be expected of you, and what you'd receive in return." He paused, his dark eyes holding mine. "But Eveline, understand that once you enter my world, leaving it becomes complicated. I'm not asking you to commit to a job. I'm asking you to commit to a life that's very different from the one you've known." I took the card, feeling its weight like a promise or a threat, depending on how I chose to see it. "I understand." "Good." Robert shifted Lily in his arms, preparing to leave. "And Eveline, regardless of whether you accept my offer, you have my protection. If anyone ever threatens you or makes your life difficult, you call that number. Anyone who helped my daughter is under my safeguard, permanently." He turned to leave, Lily waving at me over his shoulder with a smile that transformed her face into something beautiful and unburdened. As I watched them walk away, Robert Evernever's protection settling around me like an invisible shield, I realized my life had already changed irrevocably. The question wasn't whether to accept his offer. It was whether I was brave enough to admit that the life I'd been living, the existence of quiet desperation and endless struggle, was one I was ready to leave behind. The card in my pocket felt warm against my skin, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. Some people spend their whole lives searching for purpose. Mine had walked through a kitchen door on a rainy Tuesday night, and now I had to decide if I was strong enough to follow where it led.